What's going on, guys? Today we're taking a look at another issue of Hobby Japan's Gunpla Super Technique Mook here from Teppei Hayashi is the author who puts these books together anyway. And the theme for this one is building old Gundam models. So this would be like the old kits from the 80s, and that is what we're going to be taking a look at here in this book. So it should be very interesting. I have done a little bit of that, and it's definitely something that I will be doing for a future contest. So wink wink, something to think about in the future. It won't be the next contest, I'll tell you guys that, because you didn't vote for it in the poll. I put a poll out for you guys, and y'all decided to vote for something different, and that's what's going to be the next contest. We'll get to that very soon, but for the time being, the Old to Gold contest will be coming out probably beginning of next year, so just something to look forward to. Anyway, but for now, let's go ahead and take a look here at the Mook. I'm sure it'll give us a lot of cool ideas for that upcoming contest. Alright, so here on the cover we've got some cool examples of what we're going to see inside here. The RX-782 there, obviously with doing the kind of final shooting there. Got the Goof, the Zaku, the Dom, and the EFSF ship I can't remember the name of off the top of my head. And then under the dust jacket we have just the titling without the photo and everything there. Around here on the backside, MSRP for this one, 1,600 yen, so a very reasonable. It's only like $14, something like that, maybe for this. It's not the thickest of Mooks here, but it's almost 100 pages. Goes to 96, so not too bad there at all. And here we've got our contents. So right there down the side, you can see images of all the models that are going to be featured in here, with some other kind of stuff in between. It looks like so there's some blanks. Everything's all going to be in Japanese, of course. And then here's just kind of a photo of all the models collected. There it looks like we've got the 160 Dom in here for a good measure. Really cool kit. Some real type stuff, some 1 in 44, some 100 scale stuff, so a good mix of everything. Alright, so here we've got an introduction, which is going to be starting off, as so many of these Mooks do, with tools and supplies and everything. So there's a couple of example books that, like other books you may want to look into. These How to Build Gunpla and How to Build Gundam and How to Build Gundam 2. I'm not sure when these came out. Apparently it looks like that these are available on Kindle if you want to download them, but that may be like something, I'm not sure if that's region locked. Maybe you have to be in Japan or something for that, but if you guys are Kindle users, looks like maybe you can look into that. I'm not sure, yeah, when these were released. I know that these are pretty old Mooks though, but you got your standard tools and supplies here: paint, tweezers, masking tape, spray paint, enamel paint, clay. Kind of interesting with the toothpicks. This is like the exact same toothpick container that I bought in Japan, like literally probably 11 years ago now, and I'm still using that. I still haven't used all of them because I don't know how many are in there, 300, 400, 500 or something like that, but I don't go through them that quickly, and I'm still using them for over a decade now. But here's some other Mooks, it looks like, or these are other different issues of Hobby Japan. So this is the Hobby Japan issue 1 there, I guess, from 1981. Either that's 1 or it's 1 as in January. I'm not quite sure there, but there's some different issues of Hobby Japan through the years. 1990. This one is when? I'm not sure, but some text about some previous publications there. Anyway, starting off with the 1/144 scale Zaku 2, Char Zaku 2 here. So it's going to start off with just some like basic building tips, how to cut the parts off, how to get rid of the nubs, getting rid of the safety flag there as well. This is pretty much the exact same step that I use for getting rid of the safety flag. You cut it off with nippers first, leaving like a good amount left, kind of like you would just with like when you're cutting the part off the runner, and then whittle it down with the knife. And then they don't show it in here, but then I would sand it as well. I would assume that this is also sanded. It's probably just not pictured. Removing seam lines, this is also pretty standard, just using Tamiya extra thin cement for your seam lines, or just regular Tamiya cement for these larger parts if you wanted to. You can kind of use either. So there's some kind of basic assembly here. This is actually, even though we're on the first build of the book and it's already making me want to go and work on one of these old kits, it's definitely motivating just to imagine building, because normally like building Gunpla, you have a lot of parts and everything, and the complexity of it is really fun, but sometimes this is a lot more kind of similar to building something like a 120 like Machining Krieger kit sort of, which I also really enjoy. And like, so this is like the fun of building a model kit like that, which I quite enjoy, but it's Gundam, which I also enjoy. So a little bit more about just kind of how to detail up. So like once you've removed seam lines and kind of you're done with your basic assembly and gluing everything and everything like that, this is kind of like next step would be like just basic step of doing some panel lining with a Gundam marker, doing some painting with just like a spray can. So he just painted, this kit is obviously just molded in one color. So to get the two-tone, the like darker tone of green, that's just spray can painted. And it looks like just hand painting with some acrylic paints there for like some of the detail, like the dark color on the inside of the shield, for example, the dark color there for the chest. That's all just done with acrylic paint there. Advancing slightly here, using masking tape to make a mask for, usually like we think of masking as something that you do when you're airbrushing, but you can certainly mask for when you're hand painting as well, just to make sure that you get your lines nice and crisp. So like for keeping the line of the black there around the edge of the foot, you just use some masking tape in there for that. So it's also kind of, I don't know if you would necessarily call this decanting, but anyway, spraying some of that paint that he used into a cup and then brushing it on just with a brush, just to touch up a little bit once he like put those parts, glued those parts together. If the glue kind of messes up your paint a bit, you can kind of touch it up there with some of your spray can paint without actually having to spray. You could like just kind of mask this area off and just spray over it, or of course you can just do it by hand. And yeah, I mean, like pretty good results for like really basic steps there. But let's move on. Then the next model here is the 144 scale Gundam. And this kit is all molded in that kind of slightly minty white kind of color. So he's just like hand painting all these details in, hand painting everything there on the face, the yellow, the red. There's a bit kind of about just like kind of how to clean up as you're going to make sure that like your hand painting stays pretty clean, because you're working in like a really small space there. So even if you're not the best at like really fine detail painting, some nice tips in here about kind of how to make sure it's relatively clean along the way. I mean, it's not the absolute cleanest paint job that I've seen, but certainly for a beginner step, it's pretty good. This is kind of interesting the way that this is painted here. So this is just hand painted once again with the Mr. Hobby Aqueous acrylic paints, and he just kind of paints the outline first, like a pretty thick layer. Normally with acrylic paints, you want to layer it up. It takes a few layers to kind of build up the opacity of the paint, and you can see that here where it's more thinned, lighter color in the center. But around the edge, it looks like he just kind of took like the straight color and just painted it all around the edge there. And then for like the majority of the surface, he built it up over a few layers, probably 3 or 4 layers there to get that as dark as it is. But more masking around the crest there on the shield. And then the next model here is the 1/100 scale real type Zaku 1. Now I think the theme with this one is that we're going to be getting into water slides. So we've already done kind of like basics of painting and detailing and construction, and now this is kind of about how to put water slides on. One of the really great things about these old real type kits in particular, some of the other old kits do as well, but I think most, if not all of the real type kits definitely do, is that they include water slide decals. So you get this really big, nice sheet of water slide decals for the kit. And the kits are like less than $10. So, I mean, you're basically like buying the water slide decals, and you just happen to get a kit with it for the most part. So they're really fun and really nice for that reason alone. Definitely worth checking out. If you wanted to get some old 1/100 scale kits, definitely get one of the real type kits, because those decals are very nice to have. So that came out great. Next up, we have the Goof, and as I can see here, it looks like this is going to be now getting into talking about some weathering. So we got our basic steps here of some painting on the sword there as well. Some top coat, it looks like maybe there as well, some super clear top coat on that. Interestingly, although we've seen a number of builds so far where the seam lines are glued, although the seam lines are glued, they're not really cleaned up very well. They're just kind of like left like that. But that super clear top coat definitely made that looking pretty good. Then it looks like the next step is going to be applying some filtering on the kit here. Once again, using some aqueous paints from Mr. Hobby. So putting some light and dark filters kind of around on the kit, and then some dry brushing. So dry brushing here using some enamel paint and cleaning that up just to bring out the edges, and then using a toothpick, just a sharpened toothpick here, to paint some really fine detail with some more Tamiya enamel paint there for some of the little bit heavier scratches around on the edges. That looks really nice. Next up, the 1/100 scale dome. And what is going to be the feature with this one? So it looks like maybe Well, I'm not too sure. It has like some interesting like tape going on in it. Okay, so let's see. So we're painting here, painting the hand, kind of leaving the hand, I guess, is maybe molded together with the bazooka there. So you have to mask all that in order to paint the bazooka. Painting the inside of the shoulders. For the head, because it's painted in black, this is a really useful tip as well. Because the kit is molded in black, but you need that part for the head to be in red. He's painted it white first and then red on top of that. That's definitely a really important step, because if you just try to paint that red just directly over the black, it's just not going to look anywhere near as good. If you want it to be a really nice, bright, rich red, you got to paint white down on it first to give you like a good base. And then painting the mono-eye there as well. That also came out looking pretty cool. They're just using some Gundam markers, it looks like. So yeah, and then he's got this white finish. It's like a film. It's not exactly tape. It's more of like a film. It's just like a sheet of white finish film that he's cutting up and using for making like these larger striping details on the design, like around on the skirting armor and then up here on the top of the head as well. A couple of stripes there. Some of these smaller ones are some like decals. Those are just waterside decals, like here on the shoulder, here on the upper arm. But interesting to use that tape, essentially, for making some of those larger stripe details on it. Kind of interesting. We got a 1/100 scale Zaku 2 here. And this one is built, painted, painting some of that, dry brushing on the weapon. So once your base color is painted on the weapon, just doing some silver dry brushing to just bring out the details and make that look very metal-y there for the rifle there, for the Zaku's machine gun, I should say. And then painting some scratches on it. So we kind of saw earlier about how to kind of do dry brushing and painting like scratches kind of along the edges. This is like scratches and detail kind of scratches. He's made it look like, if you take a look at like here, he's made it look like there's kind of scratches or like weathering along panel lines that don't exist on the kit. So the kit doesn't have any panel line here, but it looks like it does because he kind of painted it in a way that it looks like it's scratched around the edge of a panel there, which doesn't actually exist. So here's kind of about that. So he made a mask with just some masking tape in the shape of what like the panel would look like there on the front, and then did his kind of detail painting, scratching around that, and it gives that effect of looking like there's a panel there when it's not. So that's kind of interesting. So hopefully you guys can see that here on the kit. Some of these is just kind of like scratches, just kind of randomly here and there, but some of them are made to look like scratches around non-existent panels. Very interesting, kind of cool technique there for that. All right, then the 1/100 scale mass production type Zigok here, painted in black, which looks very interesting. So he's got an LED he's adding into this one. So just getting this kind of basic battery pack and LED set. Yeah, the nice thing about these kits too is that they're very hollow. So if you did want to wire them up with some LEDs, it's very easy to do that because they have a lot of space on the inside, especially the 1/100 scale kits. So plenty of space in there to add this battery pack, which looks like to be like some sizable batteries there. So just a little bit kind of about basics of wiring up some LEDs, which is kind of cool if you guys are interested in that. And yeah, especially for these larger Xeon kits in particular, where you only need just like the one for the mono-eye. Pretty easy to do. So he cut out where the mono-eye is molded, replaced it with a like half round clear part there, and then it's lit up and looks really cool. Once again, he used that film there for these larger bits of striping on that, it looks like. So that also came out pretty cool. There's some weathering going on here too, kind of like the same, along those same lines as the weathering that we've seen so far, kind of a combination of previous techniques of filtering and scratches and stuff around on the edges. So that looks really nice. Okay, now a break from kits. This is to talk about some, I guess this is like slightly more advanced tools, like next step in tools, so like sanding paper, a little bit more about painting, I guess. We're going to be looking at some surfacer, so we're actually using some primer, drill set, plot plate, and let's see, the Salamis, that's what that is. Though this is a 1/1200 scale kit, so it's going to be a pretty small model here of the Salamis. It looks like overall, if I can tell just based on the photos, it's only going to be like maybe about 6-7 inches in length in total, but kind of cool to see some ship model kits featured in here as well, because those do exist. They're certainly not the most, like when you think of Gunpla and Gundam plastic models from the Gundam universe, I know most of us probably don't necessarily think of these ship models, but there are a few out there. So this one does look quite cool. Came out very nice. Just kind of some basic steps. A lot of like This is going to be stuff like painting on the runners, which I know is something that we generally advise against, but like for these really small detail parts, sometimes it can be helpful, just because if you want to paint it like here, for example, to hold on to this little part, you're holding onto this teeny tiny piece and trying to paint it and not messing up your paint and everything. It can be difficult, so sometimes it's easier to just leave it on the runner, paint it, and then cut it off carefully and kind of just touch up your paint if you need. So just kind of depends on what you're working on. And then we have the mobile suits that go either, I think, maybe not with that model, is it? I'm not sure if these are the models. These are in 1/550 scale, it looks like. So these are going to be pretty small. I'm not sure if this was like a different set or something anyway, but we got some gems, some balls, and this little shuttle ship here, which I'm not sure what that's called. But again, painting on the runners, just because these are so small and there's a lot of detail painting required, they're obviously just molded in just one single color. And then let's see, we got Char's Zaku once again. This is in 1/100 scale. And so now we're finally getting into how to, once you've glued to the seam line, how to actually remove the excess that you get from that. So you glue it, and then you can use a combination of using like a blade or sandpaper. You can also use a file, of course. Interesting, we're not seeing anything about any files in here. It looks like sandpaper and knife and everything. But yeah, removing mold lines, like hard mold line edges around on some of those, just kind of sanding generally. So it's kind of cleanup of the parts just to make everything a little bit nicer before you get to the stage of painting. And then once you get to sanding and painting here, it looks like how to get a nice glossy finish by sanding and resanding again on these parts. And this is kind of interesting here. There's a couple of adjustments he's making on the head. I'm not exactly sure why. I'm trying to see why he's cut out this part at the bottom of the head there. But this is interesting here on the front of the head. You can see that little bit of like green marker. So it looks like he's using like a metallic green Gundam marker there to kind of mark out the areas where he wants to cut out. And you can see there's that seam line that goes right down the middle of the head, and that's like a recessed detail there. So because it's going to be kind of like a difficult area to work with, he opted to just cut out that part there at the center and just replace it with a bit of runner here. So just a flat bit of runner, you just kind of shape it to the size that you need to fill that gap that you made there. Glue that in place, and then once you put the head together, you've just got a flat piece there rather than a piece that you have to kind of try to remove the seam line in that small little recessed area. So kind of cool little technique there for that. And it came out really nice, smooth, glossy finish there for that, for Char Zaku, looking quite cool. And another real type model kit here, it's the 100 scale Gundam in real type colors. So with this one as well, some modifications to the parts to make it so that they're easier to paint separately. For like the thigh and the lower leg, normally they would be connected, but if you want to paint them separately, you have to modify them so that they can fit together separately. So basically just cutting off the peg that connects them, and then later on it'll just have to be just glued in place. So simple enough. Drilling here, so it looks like you just drilled and made a peg there instead. You kind of don't really even need that, because you could just, like I said, you could just glue it. You really don't need anything else to add in there, but he made a peg there for that, doing kind of what looks to be basically the same thing there for the elbow joint in the arm, I think, as well, and some other kind of just cleanup modifications here around on the torso as well. And then painting, masking, painting, detail painting, more painting and masking, and painting and masking, a lot of that to get all the colors, because the real type color is pretty like colorful design, and obviously it's not the most part separated kit straight out of the box, so it is going to be a fair amount of masking to get everything painted in the correct colors, and then all of your waterside decals, of course, to go on that, painting the face and the decals and everything on the head. So came out really cool. I love the real type color scheme, definitely. Then we've got the 1/100 scale Char's Gelgug here as well, and it looks like what he's doing with this one is modifications to change the pose. So there's some different like kind of cleanup tips here that you can do just to kind of help to clean up some of the more tricky areas where you would have seam lines or areas that would be difficult to sand, so like cutting apart parts of the rifle here just to make it so it's easier to paint, or to get rid of the mold line, probably, I think, mold line and or seam line on some of these parts in the kind of the hard to reach areas. Sometimes you just have to cut the thing apart in order to get rid of that and then glue it back together. And then cuts and modifications here. Once again, he's using that like metallic green Gundam marker to mark out areas that are going to be cut on this. So cutting out areas to, it looks like, change the pose to make the pose a bit more interesting than just the kind of out-of-the-box pose, which is pretty like straight and not dynamic whatsoever. Also using clay. So we saw earlier in the book, and I think this is not the first example we've seen of this, but it's the first time that I'm kind of really noticing it and mentioning about it, but using clay rather than like, I think a lot of people normally would use like polyester putty or something, but you can just use clay in some of these parts where you need to like make a connection where you just have like this big open space and you want to make a connection for a peg there. You would have to either like build something out of plot plate inside of there, like I said, or use some kind of putty or something, but you just like stuffed a bunch of clay in there and then you can just drill into that. Once that's dry and hard, drill into that, and then that can be your place to set and pegs. So it kind of works really well using some just brass rod here for that, looks like. So able to adjust the pose very easily with that. That's a really helpful technique actually, because stuff like this, especially like in the ankle joint, it's going to be hidden up inside the bell bottoms of the lower leg anyway. You're not going to see it, so it really doesn't matter what the ankle joint looks like. So if you just stuff some clay in there and stuff some clay in there and then just make a rod in between, you can adjust the angle to whatever you need, and that works out perfectly fine. So it's a good tip to keep in mind there for that. Again, just using some more rods to just kind of pin stuff together into whatever different angle you want. Here for the shoulder armor, that is meant to just kind of just glue onto the top of the arm essentially, but he made a new connection for that by using a sheet of plot plate on the side and then making it so that it will fit down over the peg there instead, so you don't have to actually glue that. And yeah, the head on the Gelgoog is pretty wide in these old kits, so he didn't want it to be quite as wide, so basically just mark off the center area, cut it, and cut like a section out of the center, and then so when it's glued together it's not quite as wide, and definitely looks very nice on there. Definitely an improvement. And all painted, you get a really nice looking finished result there, and it's still in like a relatively static position here, but at least the angles of the pose is better than what it was just straight out of the box. So came out looking pretty good. All right, I think we got a couple builds left in here. We got Char Zeong. Char Zeong. We don't really call it Char Zeong, even though it is. We normally just call it the Zeong, I guess. But he's made the perfect Zeong by taking the legs, I think that's from the 100 scale Dom, and then combining those with the 144 scale Zeong kit to make the perfect Zeong here. So that looks really cool. So there's some modifications about just kind of how this was made, how to make the Dom legs fit into there. Once again, just cutting parts and using clay and brass rod to fit those legs up into the bottom of the Zeong skirt there. So pretty straightforward, that looks cool. Sharpening up the antenna on the head to get it nice and sharp and pointy. Some modifications over here onto the hand, cutting out the ring around the hand to make sure so that that can be taken in and out easily for modification, and for painting using some, looks like just like some thick wire there for the arms so that the arm can be shooting out. And otherwise just the same kind of painting and weathering techniques that we've seen on previous builds. I do really like the way that this book is structured. I will say how it just kind of builds up, and so like the weathering techniques don't need to be covered again for this model because we covered those already kind of as like a step-by-step process. So here you can see each build is kind of like adding to the culmination of different techniques that we've learned so far in this. So now we're getting up to the 160 scale Dom, where I think this is maybe one of the last ones we're gonna see in here. It looks like the final shooting Gundam, I think it's gonna be the second to last maybe about. So this is gonna be a culmination now in the larger scale. So basically all the same kind of techniques, but there's gonna be, of course, different challenges presented just due to the increase in size of everything. And so lots of modifications here. It looks like adding modifications in and around on these parts where you have, like, for example, seams that just don't fit, having to do some serious gluing and sanding there to get everything nice and smooth and crispy looking. Yeah, so for here, for in the legs, he did actually build something out of plot plate to fit inside of there rather than using clay. I think he probably could have used clay. I don't know, maybe it was just like a too large area, didn't want to use that much clay. but I feel like it's probably done just to kind of show a different way of doing it, when probably just using clay the same way he had done before would have worked just as well, I would imagine. But filling some more spaces in here, in and around the hand, to get the hand all looking really nice, not having any seam lines in that. A lot of really interesting modifications here around on this one, and then painting. So painting the kit, once again, of course, still going to require, even though it's in a larger scale, it doesn't mean that it's going to have that much more color separation, because it's still going to be basically the same in terms of the complexity of the kit. It's just larger. So, but the really interesting thing here, after painting everything, it looks like for a lot of the decals on these, hand painting the decals, which is something you see some modelers do. Certainly in 1/60 scale it'd be easier than in smaller scales, but still a challenge. So like the star and the 60 here is all just hand painted. So if you take a look at like some of the really small decal, like what would be decals on here, like the really small caution markings, hand painting those I think would maybe be slightly easier, because you basically just need to make it look like it's like some really teeny tiny text that's not going to be readable anyway. But some of the more like the readable, like the legible numbers and letters and stuff on there would certainly be much more challenging to make everything like straight and looking like it's like actual printed text and not just like hand painted on there. Adding a LED in there for the eye, for the mono eye as well. And yeah, it looks really cool. So the hand painted decals, I mean, is something that I think is just really admirable. It's definitely something that's challenging, and there's some modelers that are really good at it, but man, that's certainly a challenge. All right, and then the 1/44 scale Gundam and Zeong for the last shooting. So, okay, there's the Zeong there in the background, you can see as well. So this is for a little diorama here. So that's what we're gonna be ultimately building up to, making a little kind of vignette, I guess, kind of is more like it. This is a wood box. And this is very similar to like what you guys would see me use. A lot of people use these just very cheap, simple wood boxes you can get from like a dollar store or something like that. You just have to do a little bit of cleanup on the box itself. Sometimes you might have to like get rid of some like printing or something on it, sanding. He sprayed some mahogany surfacer, it looks like, on that, interestingly enough, which did actually come out looking pretty cool, I gotta say. And then the building of the model itself. So obviously some modifications gonna be needed onto this one to get it into that pose. Okay, out of the box is not gonna be able to do like this wide stance pose like that. Then just making the arm pointing up. The other arm, let's see, what did he do for the other arm to have that like kind of damaged? Didn't really do very much. It's just kind of like cut off and damaged there, and then just obviously omitting the head. Looks like he cut it up quite a bit. Is that going to be like on the ground next to the Gundam or something? I'm not sure why he's oh, so yeah, he just like cut up the head into pieces and just like had it around on the ground, so like just that the head has exploded but all the pieces are actually there. That's kind of interesting. And then some damage. So this is kind of a good example here in like our last build for the boat, showing the featured technique for this one being more like heavy physical damage. So like actually damaging the plastic parts. So sawing, burning, so you can melt the plastic, cut it, and then melt it, and then bend it out to make it look like it's actually bent out. Not an easy trick to do, I will say. I've tried that, and it's kind of difficult to do and make it actually like look good, but his actually came out really nice here for that. So some heavy damage, detail parts, just kind of adding some detail up inside there for like where it's damaged there for the Zeong. And then for making the ground, planning out the stance, like where everything's going to be placed, both kits on there, marking that out and everything, and then adding some clay, it looks like there at the base for adding in around to make the ground look realistic, and having the kits actually like in the clay, so it doesn't look like, a lot of times you'll see dioramas where it's just like the mobile suit's just like resting on top of the ground, and you have to imagine this is like a 18-meter tall mecha, and in the Zeong's case even like larger and heavier. So obviously they would be making some impact, they'd be sitting in the ground, not on top of the ground. So he's kind of just built them up together here like that, made space for the kits actually in the clay that he made there for the ground. So a bit about modeling the model itself and the diorama here, painting that, and then some weathering and everything, and then the finished result here looking very cool. So it looks like there's maybe a little bit of the pieces like of the head, maybe there's like a couple of pieces there at the bottom, not really very recognizable. So I think the step that we saw about like cutting up the head and using that like on the base seems to maybe just kind of fallen by the wayside. Sometimes when you're in the middle of a build, you work on something that you think is going to ultimately be, you know, part of the finished product, and maybe doesn't necessarily work out that way. You end up kind of scrapping that idea or whatever, but it happens. So yeah, really cool finished build there to round out the book. On the last page, we've got a little note here from the author, Teppei Hayashi. And this one here, which I'm not sure what the significance of this model is. Maybe it's like one that he built when he was young or something like that maybe, and it's just like colored with, I don't know, I'm not sure if that's like paint or marker or something, but it's pretty rough anyway. It's an old Gundam model kit, but very cool nonetheless. All right, and some credits here at the end. Some of the other Gunpla Super Technique books here that are available, and also 5-star stories here. So, all right, great stuff. Do you guys have some ideas now? Are you inspired? Are you motivated to build some old 80s kits? Because like I said, it is going to be an upcoming contest in the future, probably around the beginning of next year, like I said, so look forward to that. But for now, guys, that's it for this MOOC. Let me know if you guys have any other questions, but yeah, let me know what you thought was cool in here, what you enjoyed about this MOOC. It was cool to take a look, and like I said, I really enjoyed the structure of it, how it kind of went step by step, and each step built on steps that we'd seen in previous steps, so really cool. Unfortunately, a lot of these kits haven't been reprinted as of late, of the recording of this video, but if you guys do want to check out some more Gundam models, of course, as well as the different paints and tools and supplies and things like that that we saw in this book, you can check all that out at USA Gundam Store. The link will be down in the video description below, as always, so check out all that stuff there. And as always, guys, thank you so much for all of your support, liking the video, commenting, subscribing. I really appreciate it. Until next time, have a great day, guys. See y'all later.